for today's scouting report, I have an interesting topic, and it came up in a conversation I had with a friend. I've tweeted it out since then. How many NBA superstars are there in the league right now? I think that in itself is an interesting question to be posed, and one that everyone's going to have separate answers for. I counted them out, and I landed at 15 after trimming a couple out. I think I landed on 17 initially, and trimmed them out just because 15 is a nicer number. So apologies to those players. But 15 NBA superstars for me. I'll read out who is on my list. If you guys are in the comments, in the live chat, feel free to drop in anyone you think that I've missed. Happy to discuss those, of course. If you're watching this back, definitely comment on the posts, and we can see if we can finalize what is considered the wider scope of superstars in the league. So for me, and this is in no particular order, except for number 15, who is placed accurately and is right on the cusp. But obviously we've got Jokic, we've got Giannis, we've got KD, we've got Kyrie I put in there, Tatum, Embiid, Luka Doncic, Ja Morant, Kawhi Leonard, Steph Curry, Devin Booker. I got Zion in there. I got LeBron and AD in there. And at number 15, rounding it out, I've got Dame in there. So Damian Lillard for me, just making the cutoff. I know I've left off people that are probably going to garner attention, such as Jimmy Butler, who I don't have in that category of superstar. I think there's probably a few more that have a fair case. There's a lot that are on the cusp. One I personally have on the cusp that I really wanted to put on there, but obviously I think doesn't quite fit with the rest of that tier, is Anthony Edwards. He's right there. It's frustrating to have seen him start the season the way that he did, and I don't know how much of it was him not buying into his new role and the system around him, or if it was just him genuinely taking time to become accustomed to having to play with two bigs, which obviously takes away a lot of his game, given the rim pressure he can provide for his team and his ability to get to the basket. So for me, Anthony Edwards, one of those players who's like right there on the cusp that I didn't put in there. No, that one wasn't in order. SGA is another one that's on the cusp. I think my list isn't just this season. It's kind of like a little bit of, I don't want to say a legacy, but over maybe the last couple of seasons are obviously in play. The fact that Kawhi is there means it a little bit more than that. But it is sort of still heavily influenced by what players are doing this season as well. So SGA not being on that list, I think, can be considered a little bit harsh. He's right there as well. Him and Anthony Edwards, like, that sort of next generation superstar, they're undoubtedly going to get there, I don't think. But they're not quite there yet. So those guys just on the outside. Donovan Mitchell, another one just on the outside for me. Obviously an elite scorer, taking his game to like the next level in Cleveland so far this season. I mean, if he sustains the level of play he's had to start the year, for not just the duration, but then for the playoffs for them, it's kind of undeniable as well that he would be a top 15. He's easily a top 20 player. Like, he would be in the next 5 for sure for me. Tyrese Halliburton, that's another good one. Another one who's like an undoubted superstar of the future. Probably not there yet, just because of, the youth more so than anything else. His game is still developing. I don't think he's hit his ceiling yet. I think when he reaches his ceiling, he's going to be an absolute superstar. And the Pacers apparently getting him back this week, which is going to obviously completely change the landscape of their short-term future, given how badly they've stumbled. Paul George is another one, right on the cusp for me. I think he still gets a lot of unfair criticism. He's an elite two-way player, fantastic defender, fantastic offensive scorer, can score at all 3 levels, spaces the floor, can get to the rim, can operate in the mid-range, literally does everything you want. So another player who probably should be there and would be there if I had this as a top 20. Like I said, Jimmy Butler not there. Is Jimmy Butler in the top 20? I don't know. Playoff Jimmy Butler is. It's just hard. He's one of those guys who's in the regular season only shows up every now and then when necessary. But when he does, it's kind of, I think, undeniable. But yeah, Paul George, and like Mitch just said in the chat, I mean, he was in the MVP conversation a few years ago. In OKC, he was very much there or thereabouts. So I'm a big Paul George fan. I just don't understand the criticism he gets from a lot of fans. Yeah, and that's the thing with Jimmy Butler, right? Like, it's just in certain situations, it's undeniable that he's as good as anyone in the league. He just chooses not to do it on a nightly basis. And I guess with an injury history like his, he kind of has to prioritize health more so than anything else. So it's a little bit frustrating in that regard. Just having a look at other guys. James Harden is another one that's kind of just outside for me right now. And I think that's more because of his role at the moment. And credit to him for buying into that role, because it's clearly made Philadelphia a much better team and much more consistent team. But it's hard to have him in there as a superstar right now. Obviously, what he was doing in Houston was as good as anything we've seen in recent history in the NBA. I think it was kind of the Luka before Luka. Let's not get into where I rank Russell Westbrook in the NBA right now. But yeah, Harden, another one that's kind of just on the outside for me. Looking at other guys I had on the cusp as well. De'Aaron Fox is a really fascinating one. I think he's another player who's just super undervalued by the wider public. It seems like he's so good, and I think people just slandered him so much because of the fact that he was chosen, if you want to call it that, in place of Tyrese Halliburton as part of the trade that landed them Sabonis. Ultimately, that was a win-win trade for both teams. It's very rare that you get an undeniable win-win trade, but that's exactly what it was. Both teams benefited immensely short-term, and I think long-term as well. But I'm a big De'Aaron Fox believer, and I think he is one of those guys who is extremely undervalued in the NBA, and one of those guys who still hasn't probably reached their ceiling either. I think the whole playoff experience he'll get this season will just elevate his game a little bit more, and he'll start sort of really knocking on the door of sort of that top 20, 25 player in the league going forward. He's still got age certainly on his side. But I think that's basically it. Looking at some of the other teams that aren't featured there, the Raptors, I don't have anyone from Toronto kind of near it. Siakam, I think, is their best player. He's not someone who, if he's your best player, you're not going very far, unfortunately, certainly not in contention. So I'd struggle to put him in the top 30, maybe around 30, if I were to put out a whole list. For Washington, Bradley Beal, I don't have anywhere near there. Porzingis, much the same as well. Orlando has an absolute superstar in the making in Banchero, and another really good player in Franz Wagner as well. But both those guys, I think, obviously a few years away still from necessarily being there. Chris Middleton is another one who's kind of always considered underrated. I think he's always been fairly treated, to be perfectly honest. He's not someone who, again, if you take away Giannis and Chris Middleton's your best player, you're not going anywhere. So for me, he's not even close to being a superstar or anything in that conversation whatsoever. Ranking, if I were to rank those 15, that'd be a fun task. Maybe I'll get to doing that this afternoon. I think I'll rank I think I'm going to go and try and rank these 15 players, and I'll put them up on Twitter, and you guys can sort of pick them apart as you will. That'll be a fun little task for this afternoon, and I don't know how long it'll take me, and I don't know how many attempts it's going to take me. Clay's another one where I just don't think he's even close to being a superstar. If he had his own team, that team would probably barely make the playoffs, to be honest. He's a stud, and he's a star. Like David said, like, it's very okay to be a star and not a superstar. Like, to be a superstar is just so hard. To even be in the league, like, there's 450 of these guys in the world. It's just ridiculous. Like, these bench guys are just elite athletes in their own right. They can score the basket, like, buckets for days without any issue whatsoever. Like, the differences between a superstar and a star are just so minimal. But those 1% things add up drastically, I guess, when you get to that point and trying to differentiate players. And Clay's one of those guys. He's a star. He's as good as anyone in his role. He's in the perfect system, but he's just not a superstar, and he never will be, and he never was, and that's completely fine. That's no dirt on his name whatsoever. But yeah, I think another perfect example of someone who you would never have in the top 20 players in the league, but is absolutely deserving of all the praise that he gets for what he does on a near nightly basis. But yeah, ranking these guys out should be a lot of fun. It also comes down as well to like how much do you weight both ends of the floor to players who, like Giannis, who are just elite defensive players as well as offensive players. I think they should be rated higher personally. But obviously, not a lot of people see defense as the value that it once was. So you don't get that level of recognition anymore. But that's my scouting report for today. Having some fun with just putting together my superstar list. Like I said, I come up with 15 superstars. Those are the names of those players that I read out before. I can certainly understand people that want to say there's less and maybe just 10 superstars. I think that's very fair. And maybe if you want to say 20, I wouldn't push back too hard either. Yeah, James, I have Devin Booker in my 15. I'm pretty sure I read him out. I hope I read him out. Hey, he's a superstar for me. Devin Booker is absolutely a superstar. If you have any doubts about that whatsoever, just look at that Phoenix team in the first 2 months of the season versus the last month and a half of the season. And that is kind of all the proof you need. The drop off, I know they had other injuries as well, but the drop off is just absolutely significant when he's off the floor. He's become an elite playmaker as well, which is credit to Chris Paul and what he does in nurturing guys like that. But as a scorer, he's as good as anyone in the game right now. He performs on a nightly basis. He's fantastic in the clutch. He's reliable as anyone. So for me, he's everything you want in a superstar. And he's another guy I think that just doesn't really get the recognition he deserves either. So yeah, like I said, that's my 15. I think there's 15. I'm very keen to hear everyone else's opinions as well. So definitely drop them in the comments, be it on YouTube or on Twitter as well. So we'll, I think, revisit this topic next episode for sure, not just to see what you guys had to say, but when our next guest comes on, I'd be keen to throw it to them and see how many they have and exactly who makes their list and who doesn't make their list.